Do you remember the very first Christmas you can recall? Was it the dim lights in the living room, the smell of baking pies in the kitchen, or that small gift tucked under the tree? From the lean years of the 1940s, through the explosion of toys in the 80s, to the first whispers of digital technology in the 90s, Christmas has truly shifted with every generation. What caused these changes? In this video, we're going to travel back in time, from the 1940s all the way to the 1990s, to discover how America transformed Christmas, not just through gifts, but through culture, family, and the shared memories of an entire era. The 1940s: scarcity, rebuilding, and the spirit of self-reliance. The Christmas of the 1940s didn't start with the bright lights or bustling malls we grew familiar with later on. It began with the crackling sound of the radio in the living room, inside small homes where families gathered, the anxiety of war still fresh in their hearts. As World War II broke out, America entered an unprecedented phase where every facet of life was influenced by one common goal: saving, sacrificing, and solidarity. And Christmas, no matter how sacred, was not exempt from this harsh reality. Throughout the early 40s, everything from food and clothing to fuel was distributed via ration stamps. Sugar, butter, meat, fabric, rubber, metal, everything required careful consideration. Even seemingly small items like gift wrap or tinsel became scarce. The once lavish Christmas window displays in major cities grew simpler, sometimes even empty. People stopped asking each other what they managed to buy that year and started asking what they still had enough of to share. Manpower shortages and the prioritizing of military transport over rail lines severely restricted the supply of fresh Christmas trees. Many families who couldn't buy a real tree had to resort to rudimentary artificial trees made from paper, thin wood, or simple metal. Glass ornaments imported from Germany, a Christmas staple before the war, were boycotted or even discarded due to anti-enemy sentiment. Japanese goods also vanished from the market. Instead, America entered an era of unprecedented creativity, the age of the DIY Christmas. Women's magazines were filled with handicraft instructions, cutting stars from old newspaper, folding wreaths from worn ribbons, making tinsel from aluminum foil, decorating with pine cones, chestnuts, and walnut shells. Some families even shaved white soap to sprinkle on branches as artificial snow. Outdoor Christmas lights were drastically reduced, or even banned entirely in many areas to save electricity and materials. Christmas then wasn't bright with light, but it was warm with the resilience and creativity of every home. Gifts in the 1940s also carried a completely different meaning. They weren't luxuries, but the most practical necessities for life: a new pair of socks, a homemade woolen scarf, a warm sweater, a notebook, or a can of preserves. For many families, the biggest gift wasn't for those at home, but the care packages sent to the front lines for husbands, sons, and brothers serving overseas. Inside those packages were thick socks, hard candy, handwritten letters, family photos, sometimes even small newspaper clippings for the soldiers to read to ease their homesickness. The U.S. government also urged citizens to buy war bonds as Christmas gifts, as a way for every family to contribute directly to the final victory. The scarcity of metal and rubber forced the world of toys to completely change. Children no longer received metal cars or steel trains. They got wooden toys, cardboard toys, model airplanes and jeeps made from recycled materials. Many of these toys were lovingly handmade by parents at night, after long shifts working in war-related factories. These items weren't perfect or shiny, but for the children of that era, they were priceless Christmas treasures, because they carried with them silent love and sacrifice. In the absence of television, the radio became the soul of every American home on Christmas Eve. The entire family gathered around the wooden radio, listening to festive music, holiday messages from the president, and, most importantly, news updates from the battlefields. Many families sat in silence, hoping to hear some message from a loved one far away. Letters and packages for service members had to be sent as early as October to reach them in time for the holiday, establishing the long-lasting custom of starting Christmas shopping months in advance. When men went to war, American women shouldered almost the entire society, from factories, families, and stores to roles previously reserved only for men. In many large department stores like Saks Fifth Avenue in New York, Many of the Santas were actually women in disguise. They wore the red suit, the Santa hat, holding each child on their lap, listening to small wishes amidst the chaos of the times. That image was both moving and symbolic of the silent strength of American women during wartime. And then the war ended. Christmas 1945 became an unforgettable historical moment. After years of being dark due to energy-saving mandates, the national Christmas tree at the White House was lit again for the first time in a ceremony led by President Harry Truman. When the lights came on, many couldn't hold back their tears. Not because the lights were so beautiful, but because it was a sign that America had finally stepped out of the shadow of war into a new era of rebuilding and hope. To continue with more content, comment yes to let us know you're still following. If there's anything we can improve, take a moment to leave a comment. We're always looking to get better. Thanks so much. The 1950s, the golden age of family happiness and technology. Stepping into the 1950s, America seemed to breathe a sigh of relief and began to live again with full optimism. The war was over, the soldiers returned, families reunited, and the nation entered a new era of economic growth, suburban housing, and the American dream. Christmas, once a season of sacrifice, gradually became a holiday of abundance, light, shopping, and smiles no longer obscured by the fear of war. All across America, suburbs rapidly sprang up with low-slung, single-story homes, green front lawns, and car garages. In those modern kitchens, housewives began receiving Christmas gifts that represented new-era convenience. Dishwashers, vacuum cleaners, sewing machines, electric ovens. For men, it was DIY tools, garage sets, or items that helped them relax after work. Consumerism was no longer seen as a luxury, but became a symbol of success, stability, and the good life after the war. Christmas in the 50s was also the time when light truly became the soul of the holiday. Traditional Scotch pine trees still appeared, but now they had to compete with a completely new symbol of the technological age, the aluminum tree. These shimmering trees, made of thin, silver metallic branches, emerged late in the decade and quickly became a statement of the atomic age and the space race. Since electric lights couldn't be attached directly to the metal, people placed a rotating color wheel next to the tree, casting continuous red, blue, and yellow light onto the silver branches, creating a strange, mesmerizing effect that instantly signaled a 1950s Christmas. Along with the aluminum tree, bubble lights became the hottest decoration of the time. Inside each bulb was a low-boiling liquid that, when lit, bubbled continuously, emitting soft, crackling sounds. Children could sit for hours just watching those small bubbles moving up and down in each light. It was a unique form of magic in the post-war Christmas era. Glass ornaments also returned brighter than ever. American-made shiny bright globes, produced by the Pyrex light bulb factory, became a familiar symbol on millions of trees. They shimmered thanks to the layer of silver nitrate inside, featuring characteristic 50s colors like soft pastels, vibrant magenta, and turquoise. Some designs even featured molecular images, satellites, and the Sputnik style, reflecting America's fascination with atomic science and the dream of space conquest. Additionally, plastic blow-mold figures of Santa Claus, snowmen, and nativity scenes began appearing on front lawns, turning entire suburbs into a lively Christmas town when night fell. The 1950s Christmas was also the golden age of toys, gifts that not only brought joy but also shaped a generation. In 1950, Silly Putty appeared as a strange phenomenon, a stretchy, bouncy substance that could lift images from newspaper print. 2 years later, Mr. Potato Head was born, initially just plastic parts to be plugged into a real potato. Tiny Matchbox cars launched in 1953 from the idea of Jack Odell, who wanted his daughter to have toys small enough to hide in a matchbox when she went to school. Play-Doh appeared in 1956, Frisbee in 1957, and then the hula hoop exploded in 1958, creating national crazes as kids everywhere spun colorful plastic rings. In 1959, Barbie arrived and permanently changed the world of dolls. No longer just baby dolls for playing mommy, Barbie had an adult figure, complete with fashionable outfits, careers, and her own dreams. Along with Barbie were names like Ginny and Sweet Sue, contributing to a world of toys emphasizing individualism and imagination. However, gifts for children still very clearly reflected the gender stereotypes of the era. Girls often received the Little Homemaker baking set or the Glamour Girl beauty kit, while boys received toy guns, Davy Crockett coonskin caps, or miniature chemistry sets. Family traditions during the 1950s Christmas also strongly emphasized togetherness. Because most relatives still lived nearby, Christmas parties were often large gatherings of the entire extended family. The dining table was loaded with traditional dishes passed down through generations, but new modern recipes also appeared. Green bean casserole, green beans baked with cream of mushroom soup, was created in 1955 and quickly became an indispensable side dish at many Christmas feasts. Pies, turkey, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, all blended to create the distinct flavor of the post-war holiday season. The 1950s Christmas was also a period when the church maintained a very significant role. Midnight Mass was a widely attended tradition, especially in Catholic communities. The image of families bundled in thick coats, walking hand in hand through the cold night, entering the lit church, listening to hymns echoing in the quiet space, became an indelible memory for many Americans who grew up during this time. All these elements created a Christmas vastly different from the previous decade. No longer a holiday of scarcity and separation, the 1950s Christmas was a season of light, new toys, warm homes, and the fierce belief that the future would be better than yesterday. Americans began to trust that their children would have a fuller, safer, and more opportunity-filled childhood than the generation that had lived through the war. Do you still have any shiny bright ornaments, bubble lights, or maybe an aluminum tree from that era? Please share photos or memories in the comments below. The 1960s. Cultural conflict and television icons. If the 1950s Christmas was the bright light of post-war prosperity and optimism, then entering the 1960s, America began to experience a very different feeling, both excited by technology and television, yet uneasy about its own transformation. This was the decade of the TV set, placed squarely in the living room, of thick catalogs on the dinner table, of Christmas music blasting from wooden speaker boxes, and it was also the decade when people first openly asked, "Is Christmas becoming too commercialized?" Throughout the 60s, the gigantic catalogs from Sears, JCPenney, and Montgomery Ward practically became the Christmas Bible for every American child. Whenever those wish books appeared in the mailbox, children could sit for hours on the floor, flipping through pages, circling their dream items with a pencil, and turning them over and over until the edges of the paper frayed from too many touches. For many kids, the moment of holding the catalog was more exciting than Christmas morning itself, because that was the time when imagination ran free among remote-controlled cars, talking dolls, miniature cooking sets, and toys promising the most magical year yet. The world of toys in the 60s also expanded like never before. Etch-a-Sketch appeared like a magical drawing board with simple knobs that could create countless images. G.I. Joe was born, pioneering the concept of the action figure for boys. Chatty Cathy could talk. The Easy Bake Oven allowed children to bake cakes using a light bulb, and Super Balls bounced so high they could turn the backyard into a world of uncontrolled chaos. Toys now weren't just for playing, but were ways for children to interact with technology, imagination, and their social roles in a changing America. But perhaps nothing shaped the 1960s Christmas as powerfully as television. Black and white TVs, gradually transitioning to color, became the new center of the living room, slowly replacing the radio's dominant role. Annual Christmas specials, hosted by stars like Bing Crosby, Dean Martin, and Andy Williams, became the true prime time of the holiday season. Families gathered not just for dinner, but to watch musical performances, comedy sketches, and holiday greetings broadcast live to millions of homes simultaneously. The 60s were also the birthplace of Christmas animated films that, even today, are considered the soul of the season. In 1964, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer debuted with its unique stop-motion technique, telling the story of the outcast red-nosed reindeer who ultimately became a hero. In 1965, A Charlie Brown Christmas arrived and immediately caused a sensation, not for its special effects, but for its message against the commercialization of the holiday. By 1966, How the Grinch Stole Christmas delivered a profound, satirical story about greed and the changing of the heart. These shows weren't just entertainment. They taught an entire generation of children that Christmas wasn't just found in the gifts under the tree, but in kindness, sharing, and the feeling of belonging. In particular, A Charlie Brown Christmas became a cultural landmark. In an era where advertising saturated every media channel, a cartoon daring to openly critique consumerism was virtually unheard of. The image of Charlie Brown choosing a small, scrawny tree instead of the shimmering aluminum trees heavily impacted public taste. After this special, the aluminum tree, the symbol of the 1950s Christmas, began to fade in popularity, yielding to simpler, natural green Christmas trees. 1960s Christmas decor still bore the mark of mid-century modern, but bolder and more colorful than before. Pastel pink, turquoise, or silver artificial trees appeared in many living rooms, reflecting the era's innovative spirit. The space age still had a clear influence, with futuristic motifs on decorations. Christmas at this time was both hoineam, nostalgic, yet tinged with the feeling of stepping into the world of tomorrow. A very special tradition was born this decade, entirely from television: the Yule log. In 1966, WPIX-TV in New York aired a 17-second loop of a crackling fireplace scene accompanied by Christmas music, initially just to fill airtime. Surprisingly, the image brought an unusual sense of warmth to apartments without real fireplaces. Since then, millions of families turn on the TV every Christmas season just to watch the fire burn, hear the wood crackle, and feel a simulated yet very real sense of peace. Although Christmas became mysterious to television and advertising, traditional rituals still held an important place in family life. Sending handwritten Christmas cards remained an indispensable part. The entire family sat around the table, writing individual wishes to relatives, friends, and colleagues, sometimes including a letter summarizing the whole year. These cards were a very real connection thread between people living in a rapidly changing society. The 60s was also a period of deep social upheaval. The civil rights movement, the Vietnam War, generational conflict, and counterculture. All of this subtly permeated the Christmas atmosphere. Alongside the bustle of shopping and entertainment, there remained a more reflective layer of emotion, where people began to think more about the true meaning of the holiday, about peace, about reunion, and about what was happening in the world outside. The 1970s, the dawn of the electronic era and big culture. Entering the 1970s, America's Christmas began to take on a very different energy. Bigger, louder, more vibrant, and also more electronic. This was the decade of intersection between the old and the new, between intact family traditions and the first steps of modern technology creeping into every living room. Christmas was no longer just a holiday. It gradually became a months-long shopping season associated with shopping malls, TV commercials, and unprecedented toy crazes. Throughout the 70s, the shopping mall rose to become the center of social life. These enclosed, air-conditioned centers, with Christmas music echoing constantly, quickly became the meeting point for the whole family. Parents shopped for gifts, children ran hand in hand past stores, teenagers gathered in the food court, and Santa Claus sat patiently in the main atrium, holding each child for a photo. Although the Sears catalog still played a significant role, the mall had become the new Mecca of Christmas, where people not only shopped but also strolled, admired the lights, listened to music, and felt the festive atmosphere filling every aisle. Parallel to the mall, downtown department stores still tried to maintain tradition with lavish window displays. Families could stand for dozens of minutes in front of the glass panes, watching moving models, Santa Claus riding a sleigh, reindeer flying across the sky, snow sparkling under golden lights. That was the unique magic of the 1970s Christmas, where people didn't just buy gifts, but went to see Christmas. Home decor also saw many changes. Ceramic holiday villages began appearing on mantels, windowsills, and decorative tables. Tiny snow-covered houses, small churches with inner lights, bakeries, street lights, created a miniature town that children could gaze at for hours. In windows, plastic electric candles with orange bulbs gradually replaced real candles, providing warmth without the risk of fire. The 1970s Christmas was no longer just a tree. It gradually became a Christmas space spreading throughout the house. Music and television continued to hold immense importance. The Carpenters' Christmas Portrait album became the familiar soundtrack in countless living rooms, with gentle, clear melodies reflecting the spirit of the decade. On the TV screen, The Rankin-Bass animated Christmas specials continued to cast their annual spell. Santa Claus is Coming to Town, The Year Without Santa Claus, with their stop-motion clay characters, warm narration, and songs that children could hum all winter long. These movies weren't just for viewing. They became a ritualistic part of Christmas, just like hanging stockings or placing the star on the treetop. But perhaps the biggest change of the 1970s Christmas was the appearance of electronic technology in the toy world. For the first time, children weren't just playing with imagination and mechanical objects, but interacting directly with sound, light, and circuits. Bizarre toys like Pet Rock, a rock sold as a pet, reflected the era's unique humor. Stretch Armstrong appeared with his rubber body that could stretch infinitely, becoming the ultimate arm strength test for millions of kids. At the same time, rudimentary electronic devices started appearing on Christmas gift lists. Simon, the electronic memory game with flashing buttons, tested memory and reflexes. Speak and Spell, an educational toy with a robotic voice, had children learning to spell with a machine for the first time. Those simple, sometimes stiff electronic sounds opened the first door to the digital world in the imagination of an entire generation. And then, a true revolution occurred in the mid-70s. Home video games. Pong, a gaming system connected directly to the TV, appeared like a miracle. Atari partnered with Sears to sell Pong under the Telegames label, and by Christmas 1975 alone, it became Sears' best-selling item. Families, for the first time, were not just watching TV, but playing with the TV. Those simple beep-beep sounds, the white bars moving against the black screen, ushered in a whole new era for family entertainment, laying the groundwork for the Atari 2600 and the world of cartridge gaming that followed. The influence of movies on the gift market also became stronger than ever. After Star Wars debuted in 1977, action figures of Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, and stormtroopers flew off the shelves at breakneck speed. The $6 Million Man toys with their telescopic eye feature also captivated children. The 1970s Christmas began to show one thing very clearly. Television and cinema weren't just entertainment. They directly dictated what children would want under the tree. Along with technology and toys, the way people recorded Christmas memories also changed. Kodak pocket cameras became widespread, making photography no longer the privilege of formal occasions. On Christmas morning, new film rolls were loaded into the camera, and every moment of unwrapping gifts, laughter, and surprise was captured with quick clicks. These slightly blurred, sometimes overexposed photos became the most authentic witnesses to the memories of an entire generation. What is the most memorable Christmas gift you ever received? Tell us your story in the comments. The 1980s, the shopping frenzy and the breakthrough gaming era. If the 1970s Christmas was the first step of electronics into the living room, then in the 1980s, America seemed swept away in a true whirlwind of shopping, advertising, and toy crazes unprecedented in history. This was the decade where Christmas was not just a holiday, but a campaign, stretching from October, where shopping malls were brightly lit day and night, Christmas music played non-stop, and children's wish lists were longer than ever before. The shopping mall in the 80s was the hub of all social activity. Families flocked to the mall, not just to buy gifts, but to take photos with Santa, eat at the food court, watch performers, listen to holiday bands, and feel the Christmas atmosphere thick in every breath. Giant ceiling-high Christmas trees were erected in the main atrium, covered in lights and tinsel. Children waited in long lines to sit on Santa's lap, whispering their wishes, while parents waited, arms laden with heavy shopping bags. The 80s were also the period when the Christmas catalog reached its final peak. But this time, the children's Bible was no longer Sears or Montgomery Ward, but the Toys R Us Dream Book. This massive wish book was distributed free, hundreds of pages thick, filled with images of toys, games, dolls, cars, robots, and cartoon characters. Kids marked pages with sticky notes, circled items in red pencil, folded corners of favorite pages, and incessantly flipped through until the pages softened from too much handling. For many 80s kids, the Dream Book was truly the treasure map of Christmas. 1980s shopping was also tied to a very special tradition, layaway. Parents brought toys to the counter, made a small down payment, and then returned weekly to pay installments until just before Christmas, when they could finally pick up the goods. It was both a way for families to manage finances and a way to prolong the holiday suspense. At the checkout counter, before electronic scanners were common, the carbon credit card imprinting machines made a heavy chunk-chunk sound when swiping the card, a sound that became a distinct memory of the 80s Christmas. And then, toy crazes began to erupt on an unheard-of scale. In 1983, Cabbage Patch Kids appeared and quickly caused chaos in stores. These soft-bodied, round-faced dolls, each coming with its own adoption certificate, created an unprecedented sense of attachment. Parents shoved, fought, and even brawled just to secure a doll for their child before Christmas Eve. The press called them Cabbage Patch riots, and America witnessed for the first time how a toy could create chaos on a national scale. Simultaneously, the toy world entered a phase of imaginative explosion. Transformers appeared with the ability to morph from robot to vehicle or plane, encouraging children to think about space, structure, and motion. He-Man and the Masters of the Universe dominated shelves with muscular figures, Castle Grayskull, and endless imaginary battles. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles brought martial arts savvy, funny, and personality-filled turtles. Conversely, Care Bears and Rainbow Bright dolls focused on emotions, compassion, and friendship. Another indispensable icon of the 1980s Christmas was Teddy Ruxpin, the world's first talking teddy bear. Inside the bear was a small cassette player that synchronized mouth and eye movements when playing a tape, telling stories to children. For many kids, Teddy Ruxpin wasn't just a toy, but the first friend who told them bedtime stories. Around the same time, Rubik's Cube became a global phenomenon, challenging the intellect, patience, and spatial reasoning of millions over several consecutive Christmases. But perhaps the most significant milestone of the 1980s Christmas was the rise of home gaming consoles. The Nintendo Entertainment System, NES, brought arcade-quality gaming into the living room. With its revolutionary rectangular controller featuring the D-pad, the NES turned gaming into a personal, yet profoundly social experience, as siblings and friends gathered around the TV to play Super Mario Bros., Duck Hunt, or The Legend of Zelda. The 8-bit music, the click of the plastic Duck Hunt gun, the cheers when overcoming a new level, became the signature sound of the 1980s Christmas. Music and movies in this decade also helped shape the holiday sentiment. Run DMC's Christmas in Hollis marked the first time hip-hop entered the world of Christmas music. Films like A Christmas Story, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, and Scrooged became essential holiday viewing. The lines, the clumsy, humorous, sometimes absurd scenes were replayed year after year, creating a sense of familiarity, like a family ritual. 1980s Christmas decor was also more ostentatious than ever. The hollow plastic blow mold figures lighting up suburban lawns became the emblem of an entire era. 6-foot-tall Santas, smiling snowmen, reindeer pulling sleighs, all illuminated in the winter night, transforming entire neighborhoods into a dazzling light show. If you could go back to one Christmas season in the past, which decade would you choose to fully relive once more? The 1990s, the transition to the digital age and the end of the catalog. Entering the 1990s, America's Christmas stepped into a unique period of transition. Old habits spanning generations were quietly fading away. The digital age began knocking on every door, and Christmas was never quite the same. For children and teenagers of the 90s, the wish list no longer revolved around mechanical toys. New generation gaming consoles quickly became the focal point. The Nintendo 64 brought the vivid world of 3D into the living room. Simultaneously, the first-generation PlayStation emerged, offering realistic, mature, and cinematic gaming experiences. Besides consoles, the 90s still had toy crazes. Tamagotchi, the tiny virtual pet, had an entire generation of children obsessively caring for it. Beanie Babies became a nationwide collecting phenomenon. Tickle Me Elmo continued the craze with his infectious giggle. However, the most symbolic change of the 1990s Christmas was not in toys, but in the quiet disappearance of the catalogs. The Sears wish book began to thin out and finally vanished from family mailboxes. Children no longer lay on the floor circling dreams with a pencil. Instead, they started looking through computer screens. Simultaneously, big box stores like Walmart and Target rose dramatically. Everything was available under one roof. Shopping became faster and more convenient than ever, but the sense of anticipation and excitement that lasted weeks also gradually faded. Late in the 90s, online shopping began to appear. The ability to sit at a computer and order gifts remotely opened up an entirely new future for Christmas. Movies and advertisements continued to powerfully shape the seasonal emotion. Home Alone became an instant icon of the 90s Christmas. In 1994, Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas Is You was released and quickly became an immortal modern Christmas tune, marking a major shift in holiday music. Christmas decorations also changed toward greater convenience. Pre-lit artificial trees became widely popular. Like This Alive. A Pink Christmas, 1978. A Pink Christmas, 1978, also known as the Pink Panther Christmas Special, brought a completely different style to holiday television. This special had no talking or chaos. Instead, it was a clever, calm, and quietly humorous cartoon. Viewers recall the Pink Panther strolling through snow-covered streets, with gentle Henry Mancini jazz lightly playing beneath every scene, creating an atmosphere that gives you time to breathe between laughs. The animation is silent as a cat in a library and feels like a Christmas postcard coming to life. And that is the journey of Christmas in America from 1940 to 1990, a journey of memory, family, and era. Do you remember your most cherished Christmas moment? Tell us about it in the comments section. If you love stories like this, don't forget to subscribe, check out more videos in the Back to Yesterday series, and share this video so we can keep these old memories alive together.